Welcome back to Son of Chelsea. Daniel Childs here for today's show. Happy Monday, if we can call it a happy Monday. I hope you've had at least a decent start to the week after the misery of Saturday against Sunderland. This is going to be a show that we like to do where we sort of look a little bit more in depth at some of the numbers and also kind of a consistent problem defensively Chelsea have had so far this year that was notably exposed against Sunderland but has also been exposed earlier in the season, plus some other interesting details from the weekend's game. Please let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Like, subscribe, regular content around Chelsea FC. You can also listen to the show as a podcast, which I know many of you do. If you want to interact across social media at Son of Chelsea, and also you can email the show at sonofchelseaofficial@gmail.com. A lot of that's there. I also just want to quickly say I do have a Substack out today, my latest Substack piece, another cheap plug, apologies. And it's all about sort of the thin margins of Chelsea season so far, why we have kind of this yo-yo nature, especially this season. I know it's kind of been arguably a consistent theme about Chelsea under Clearlake of kind of massive high emotions and then we drop down and then, you know, there's a feeling of inconsistency and concern and confusion. But specifically, I'm just focusing on this season and why currently the thin margins in Chelsea's games are leading to this inconsistent form we've seen so far in the league form so far this season. And that gets directly to our first kind of stat of the day, because the point tally after 9 games in the last 7 seasons, I think it is quite notable when you see some fluctuation in terms of where Chelsea generally have been. What I'd argue actually in kind of a broader sense, it shows you the inconsistencies that have been there for a long period of time. So we are slightly worse off, 3 points worse off at this stage this season compared to last under Enzo Maresca. We've got 14 points in 25-26 compared to 17 points in 24-25. That was significantly better than the previous 2 seasons where we had 12 and 13 points. 21-22 under Thomas Tuchel, when it looked like we might be in a title race, is the high really of the last 7 seasons, 22 points, which I think in the current Premier League table would put us top as well, very close to the top of Arsenal. 18 points in 2021, which I think was still when Frank Lampard was in charge, and then the season before that 17 points. So in terms of an average, like I don't, Chelsea are below average, or I guess in kind of a similar vein of where they've been when they're just challenging for Champions League qualification. So the points we've got so far this year don't indicate that Chelsea cannot qualify for the Champions League. And I think it was quite notable that if Chelsea had beaten Sunderland on Saturday, they may have even been as high as third given some of the other results. So it really is a turbulent Premier League season so far, which is a good thing if you're Chelsea and you're an inconsistent team, because it shows you that if you put a run of wins together, you probably are going to quickly jump up the table. So it means it's not an unsalvageable situation. You can never say that early in the season as we are, but I do think there is some concern there. Shagaga Dimitri pointed out, and there's 2 stats he pointed out individually, which then maybe also links to collectively. And firstly, it's about Joao Pedro and the lack of attacking output he has had pretty much since September. You look at it, 600 minutes here, over 600 minutes in the 25-26 season. I mean, non-penalty goals, non-existent. Non-penalty XG in shot, 0.75. Shooting, again, non-existent. Non-penalty XG, again, 0.3. Really, really poor. In terms of self-created shot, 33%. Successful dribbles, 1.4. He's a lot better in terms of passing, 79.3, but assists 0.14, expected assists 0.12. So again, not incredible. And in terms of the attacking output, it shows a player that has really regressed, especially from his very, very high start at Chelsea. And I think that's probably to be expected, given how ridiculous his start to life at Chelsea was. It couldn't have gone much better. I think his start to life at Chelsea is one of the best starts you've seen from a signing. Being able to maintain that is obviously going to be a challenge. But in terms of where he fits within the current system, what is his best position, and how can the things he's not bringing to the table can be alleviated by other people bringing them to the table, I think most notably in terms of shots. But he is an attacking player. We're not talking about a defensive midfielder. You know, even if you are a second striker, a left forward, a left winger, a right winger, I expect his shots to be a lot higher. And it was something I warned in the summer, that when you let quite easily the likes of Nicholas Jackson and Oni Madueke walk out the door, for whatever you say about those players and their own products, which you can criticise, I think both of those players, especially in the case of Madueke, would take a lot of shots. And that's something our production level in that aspect has kind of massively regressed and needs to improve, especially with no Cole Palmer in the team currently. And just more generally, the whole team, 24-25 Chelsea compared to 25-26 Chelsea. Again, maybe unfair comparison between 38 games, the full Premier League season, and only 9 games, but maybe a sign of the patterns that are happening so far this year in terms of Chelsea. Possession-wise, are a lot stronger than they were last year, but in terms of pretty much every other metric, performance, attack, defence, duels, pressing, set pieces, box efficiency is a little bit higher there, and counter it almost generally our level of performance has regressed so far this year. That doesn't mean it's going to maintain, and we're in that kind of vein for the rest of the season, but I think, as I explained in my Sunderland review, it's something that absolutely needs to improve if Chelsea are going to have a decent season. I think you cannot argue against that. Like, if Chelsea continue to perform the way generally they have in the first 9 Premier League games, you can add maybe a couple of other games in the Champions League and Cup to that, we will probably have a difficult season because it relies far too heavily on us overperforming in attack, and especially our opposition being wasteful and underperforming in their attack against us because we're giving away a high quality number of opportunities. A thing I pointed out in the Sunderland game and also the Nottingham Forest game, we lost on XG in both games. Now, we didn't lose both games, but what it shows you is against a variety of opposition, and sometimes quite poor opposition, Chelsea are giving away a lot of chances. And it's why we can win one week and we can lose the next. But, if you continue to work within those kind of very thin parameters, like, you can see why Chelsea will go on maybe a run of 2 or 3 wins, but then they'll quickly have a setback, which obviously is something we're looking to avoid, especially in games where Chelsea should be getting a lot better. So the thing I wanted to look at here in terms of set pieces are a big thing in the Premier League this year, and I've seen the narrative post this weekend has been, the Premier League's becoming boring. Isn't it frustrating how much focus there is on set pieces? And I kind of just, it's not dismissing that, but it's like, if you're a coach in the Premier League, there's only one way to get around this. You have to adapt to it. You can moan, you can, sit back and complain that the world's against you. I've seen Arne Slot kind of talking a little bit like this, where it seems like he's quite angry and upset and a little bit offended, really, almost Arsene Wenger-esque antics in his press conferences, where he seems a little bit offended that teams are playing in ways to undermine Liverpool. You as the superior team, I said this in my Sunderland review of Chelsea, you've got to find ways around it, and you have to become brilliant in the current era you are. In a more progressive era, I want Chelsea to be effective in that style of football, but if you're in a Premier League that is very much being defined by set pieces, if you're not good at them, you are going to fail. And looking at the nature of the goals Chelsea concede, it's not like we're conceding worldies. We're conceding goals that it almost feels like with a few tweaks, with a few more players being alert or tracking back and cutting out stupid individual errors. I'm not saying everything's going to be solved, but you feel like Chelsea will at least put themselves in a better position game to game. So the long throw from Sunderland, we knew this was going to be an issue from the start of the game, and we knew it was going to be a threat. The long throw, and the problem specifically with this is Chelsea win the first contact, but the issue comes, and I'm going to reference the Brentford game here because it's quite similar. Usually, it's very rare from a long throw that the first contact, an opposing player is going to be able to head that ball literally from a throw, maybe in the old Rory Delap days, but literally into your goal. Usually, either a defender's getting to it first and it's being knocked back, and then it's why the second ball in these kind of situations is so vital. And those second balls usually drop to players who aren't traditionally defensive. In this case, you have both Pedro Neto and Alejandro Garnacho, effectively both of them late to the loose ball that Bertrand Traore latches onto, and his shot, goes towards goal, is eventually deflected into the path of Isidore, who puts it in the back of the net, effectively on the goal line. It falls into a really unfortunate place, but it's a lack of just, I think, awareness from Chelsea and sluggishness. That's how painful those moments can be if you aren't aware, and how easy Chelsea's lead and positive start to the game evaporate it. And it feels really basic because I look back to the Brentford game. Right at the end of that game, Chelsea are mere minutes away from claiming an unlikely and quite rare win away from Brentford. And it's another long throw, this time from the other side. Chelsea, I think this one's worse defensively, because if you watch it, and I'll put the screenshots up on YouTube, but if you listen to the podcast, a row of blue, and none of them really a convincing contact on it. So from a defensive point of view, it's a bit more of a shambles than the first one. But again, first contact, Chelsea don't clear their lines. This time the ball ends up at the back post. And again, Alejandro Garnacho is guilty of a lapse in concentration, isn't really alert to it, is second. And from that moment, Carvalho latches onto it. And it's a very costly goal, and it cost Chelsea 2 points. Now, not every team in the Premier League is a specialist in set pieces or a specialist specifically at long throws. I think there are a few teams, and maybe we will see because of this kind of tone and style shift, more teams are going to focus on long throws. But one of the things that does concern me is about Chelsea and the nature of the goals they concede. People pointing out like crosses to the back post, falling asleep at the back post. We've seen that before. But specifically this season has been balls over the top of our defence and our ability and inability really to deal with it, and how easy it feels like and how isolated our centre-backs become. Yes, the Sunderland winner is kind of the most extreme example of this. I'm sure all of you, not only who watched the game, but have seen the screenshot. This is the screenshot of Robbie. His back's to goal and he's got Tosin near him trying to shield the goal for Robert Sanchez, and Trev Chalobah's waiting, and there isn't really another blue shirt in sight. And eventually he holds up the ball. It's easy for Robbie to shirk any sort of challenge from Tosin, physically kind of bats him away, and then sets up the winner. In this occasion, I'm looking at it and going, what should Trev Chalobah do? Should he leave Tosin? Should he leave the ball basically and look instead for runners? I think the argument could be in this situation, he is not alert enough to go out and close the shot maybe, or close the pass that Robbie wants to play. The counter argument that I've seen made is that, well, firstly, I think maybe it's an argument against trusting Tosin, is that Trev is worried that physically Tosin's going to get beat one-on-one and then it's going to become an easy shot. So he's trying to cut down the angle really. So when he does cut onto his left foot there, it's not an obvious thing for him to just try and take a shot at Sanchez. He actually has to cut back. I would argue the more I've watched this goal, there's two problems. The first one is Tosin, which we'll get back to because there is a repeat example of this against Brentford, another opponent who went quite physical, went quite direct against Chelsea. But also, one of the things I noticed about this goal was the lack of tracking back from a Chelsea point of view. It seems to take an age for Chelsea players to get back in shape. And this is not a situation where Chelsea are already 1-0 down and you're kind of going, okay, we'd rather lose 2-0 than 1-0. 1-1, you've at least got to take away a point from this game. And the lackadaisical, kind of sluggish way Chelsea players responded to this counter-attacking opportunity in the 92nd, 93rd minute is really unacceptable because, you look at the way Sunderland were very unified, got into shape quickly. Again, it's the excuses that I see from higher, elite clubs that they can't do the basics right. Other clubs lesser than them or with less quality than them can. And you end up paying the price for it. So again, I think this was a collective failure more than anything else. But yeah, individually, Tosin has been a problem for Chelsea. Tosin and Chalobah hasn't been as effective a combination as even earlier in the game. Chalobah and Achimpong. Achimpong was really a star in this game. But yeah, we look at the ball over the top. The obvious one is Kevin Shard for Brentford, the opening goal in that game. Ball gets played over the top of Chelsea's defence. It's another one-on-one situation with Tosin. He does very little to close down the angle. Wesley Fofana, whose recovery pace should be a lot better and a lot more effective. This is kind of why you have him in the team. Chalobah's way out of the picture. And the goal's quite easy. It's a quite simple goal. And I referenced the Man United game. You think about the Mbermo run through that Sanchez takes him out. We have had many opportunities and situations where a ball gets played over the top, and it always seems to be the common denominator is Tosin being in the team. He just doesn't seem to have the speed, and teams are really exploiting that on a number of occasions. And because there's no Levi in the team, that's really hurt Chelsea from a defensive quality point of view. And it just seems quite easy for teams when Tosin's on the pitch. And I think it's at the moment, you can't really say that Tosin is justifying his starting place. And the fact that I've seen this a number of times now, and not all of them get punished, but these are two obvious ones that did punish Chelsea. Tosin, who I thought had a strong end to the year, currently right now without Levi Colwill, just doesn't seem to be the right player, especially for the way Chelsea want to play in games where they dominate a lot of the ball. Because an example of Josh Achimpong in this situation, where a ball gets played over top, Granit Xhaka runs through. And all right, Granit Xhaka I think is a decent attacking player when he gets into these kind of situations. But, it's not a centre forward. It's not a tricky winger. So he doesn't quite have the speed of others. But I thought, look at the way Josh Hutchinson deals with this situation where he closes down the space, even though Xhaka wants to get it onto his right foot. He gets in, he closes the angle, he blocks the shot, crisis averted effectively. And it was quite notable that how simple that goal was for Sunderland to score comparative to when Josh was on the pitch, where suddenly Chelsea with him and Chalobah had a lot more speed in their defence to counteract that when you're coming up against a team that are sitting deep and you have so much of the ball. You do have to take a bit of risk, absolutely, when you're trying to break down a low block. Like, there is always that threat of transition. I think for me, the short-term solution is Josh Hutchinson needs to maintain his place in the starting 11. I'd be intrigued to see, with a better Wesley Fofana, a Fofana Achimpong centre-back pairing, because at the very least you both have, theoretically you should have better speed in that centre-back pairing and mobility. I think sometimes though, having Fofana and a younger Achimpong might not be the best centre-back pairing, because I think Fofana does have a tendency to rush out, and you don't really want two centre-backs who are rushing out consistently, leaving their area and then vacating it and maybe putting yourselves in more dangerous positions. But listen, compared to what Tosin's done, I thought Chalobah's form this season has been concerning as well. It's a difficult, tricky area. I mean, will we even see Jarell Hatto get some minutes as a left centre-back? Because the natural left centre-back really hasn't been there, especially with Badia Shield and Colwell both injured. So I want to hear your thoughts on this down in the comments below. Is this something that can be easily fixed? Are we going to have to wait for a long period of time? Let me know down in the comments below. But that is it for today's show. Please like, subscribe, give me your thoughts on everything we discussed and more. We'll be back tomorrow to preview the League Cup clash with Wolves away from home, and we'll get into how Maresca approaches that game, because following a disappointing loss, it doesn't give him maybe the leeway with results. If results had gone well over the weekend and Chelsea had won convincingly, there's going to be pressure, especially against a dreadful Wolves team, to get the win and to make sure we are getting past the fourth round, which we failed to do in both domestic cups last year. So stay tuned for that. Turn those notifications on so you don't miss any of the shows on the channel, and I will see you again very soon. All the best.